see Matthew Syed in the studio. I haven't seen you for so long.
It's been too long. And I have to say, Mike, a couple of things. Firstly, you're very generous on Twitter. And
thank you.
You often
I'm not always described as generous.
Well, you are to me, and I'm not as prolific on that particular platform as you, but it's very, very good and very kind. I'm glad we see eye to eye on a lot of these issues.
We do.
It's a great running order. You do that so well.
Thank you.
Because that didn't look scripted. You just pick up the papers. That's a skill.
Yeah.
That takes years.
I can't
to
do.
master.
They tried to make me scripted. You know, when we had that sort of brief experiment with television, and they tried to put me on an alter, I was like, I can't do auto cue. I can't do it.
But don't you think that the whole arc of broadcasting and content, if it's overly editorialised in advance, it doesn't sound real. And you go on some of these podcasts where, some of these political podcasts, there's no briefing call. You turn up, you have a conversation.
Yeah.
You learn from each other.
And that's the point.
You don't want it to be overly scaffolded, because then you and I may say things that surprise each other over the course. If the producers here are good, by the way.
Brilliant.
One of them brought me in, literally crawled out because they're worried about being caught. No, this is a fantastic.
I insist on him crawling.
Great team.
Yeah, I insist on him crawling whenever he comes in here. It's just a matter of course.
He does that regardless.
But you know what? I'll tell you what Damien, who's brilliant, came up with yesterday, because we were talking about Keir Starmer, and I've got to get your opinion on this, because I said, you know, the man seems to be a compulsive liar, it seems to me. He doesn't seem to be able to tell the truth even when it's presented to him in front of him. You know, he tries to use lawyerly ways to kind of get around the way to speak, right? And I said, there must be a word for it. Damien found it, and I've decided this is what Keir Starmer suffers from.
But don't you think this is true of a lot of politicians?
Yeah.
It's almost institutionalised. In order to get elected, think back to when Starmer tried to become leader of the Labour Party. He offered a whole series of promises because he wanted to show that he was within the Corbyn tradition.
Yes.
He then gets voted as leader and then slowly withdraws and gets rid of all these promises. Doesn't like to admit that he's actually lied.
Well, do you remember when he said, you know, Jeremy Corbyn's my friend, I'd like to see him to become Prime Minister. Later, he was never my friend.
Yeah.
It's just incredible. But there's a word, right, and I want to read this to you because it's fascinating. Mythomania is apparently what he suffers from.
I thought you were just going to say liar.
No.
Which captures a lot of it.
The definition of it is a psychological condition characterised by a compulsive and habitual tendency to lie, often with no clear benefit or motive.
So tell me if you can think of an example of somebody who's gone into... See, I've been a member of Labour most of my life, and I joined the Conservatives recently, and I mentioned this publicly, and people now introduce me. You're a member of the Conservative Party, as if I've contracted some rare disease.
Yeah.
I feel, by the way, I've stayed pretty much where I always was politically, and the whole jamboree of British politics has moved very significantly to the ultra-progressive, ultra-liberal, fiscally irresponsible left.
Yes.
But I can't think of any politicians. With a couple I think Ken Clarke was pretty consistent through the arc of his career. A Conservative former Health Secretary and Chancellor. But beyond that, it's difficult to think of people who
But even he had his kind of moments of kind of not being particularly right-wing, you know, because he wasn't. And I think...
No, I meant in terms of telling the truth.
Oh, I see. OK.
He was pretty truthful.
Yeah, I guess so.
His position. He often said what he thought, and he was willing to rebel against the party line from time to time. But it's very difficult, I think, to...
Robin Cook maybe would be another one.
Yeah,
you know, he was a man who resigned over Iraq. He had a kind of position on that, and he stuck with it, and he suffered for it as a result. I mean, I think one of the problems now, I mean, a lot of people I talk to who used to vote Tory all their lives, and they tell me that, they say, well, actually, you know, the party left me, I didn't leave the party, and they feel as though the Conservative Party now isn't what they signed up to.
Well, I think it's fair to say the 2010 to 2024 Conservative administration was the most liberal left in British history.
Definitely.
Not just the debt rising consistently over time, but also this absolutely extraordinary rise in legal migration, beyond all sanity or precedent, serially voted against by the British people. Effectively, the floodgates were opened. Whatever you think about immigration, there has to be some control and some understanding over numbers. The complete failure to stop the boats. Another thing that they said that they would do and kept failing to do. So I do think that administration was poor, but Labour has come in, and you would have hoped that they would have had a plan to arrest what is the fundamental problem, which is stagnant productivity. We need to have, I mean, it's an obvious thing to say, economic growth if we're going to drive what we need to, which is military spending.
A lot of people also say that we've lost the ability to manufacture anything in this country, so therefore how do you make productivity happen if it's only, sort of on paper, if you like.
Yeah, but why are we not manufacturing anything? And then you have to look at the other fundamental issue. There was a period, Mike, let's be optimistic. Between 1820 and 1920, we were the most dynamic, can-do economy in the world.
Yeah.
The most powerful country in the world.
But is that partly because...
By the way, Mike, isn't that an amazing thing?
It is an amazing thing.
These islands off the west
tiny
coast
little
of
place.
The Eurasian landmass, fantastic. Industrial revolution,
absolutely.
The rule of law, the common law.
Innovative.
Now, but why were we so good? We built things. We built a rail network, sewage system, the London Underground, bridges, ships. Extraordinary. Other countries were taught. We acted. Now we're a talking shop. The Thames crossing.
Yeah.
Something like 600,000 pages for the planning application, 300 million before we even put a shovel in the ground.
Yeah.
Norway built the world's longest road tunnel for half the price.
Yeah.
And because we can't build anything, nuclear power stations, infrastructure, energy grids, our electricity is the most expensive in the world. And that means we're deindustrialising.
Right.
And why? So the question then becomes, Mike, why are we not building? We did, why can't we now?
Yes.
And it's because governments, this is a weird, I don't know if you agree with this, are so worried about upsetting people.
Yeah.
In order to have a nationally beneficial project, you have to upset some local people.
You do.
If you're snookered by local veto every time, you never build nationally beneficial projects, and the whole country, every locality becomes poor. We have to get over this. We've got to start building. We've got to start governments saying things that are unpopular in the short term to create long-term success. That was our quintessential virtue as a nation during our great rise.
I think also
we're laughed at around the world for our...
well, nothing works. I mean, I say this to people now all the time, and you know, optimism is a great thing, and I'm very happy to be optimistic. But unfortunately, you know, with every sort of working day that you have, something gets in the way. You know, and I think one of the problems that we have now is that we don't build things for the right reasons, even when we do. Right? For example, I was talking to a guy who is a kind of, you know, what I would call a bit of a sort of Del Boy character, but he's involved in a lot of the big construction projects. He's involved in he was involved in building the Silvertown Tunnel, involved in the Channel, the Thames crossing. He's involved in Heathrow and the new runway. And he said, actually, you know what? The secret to these projects is not about making them work. It's about making money off the back of them, basically. So they don't need a new runway at Heathrow. The reason they're making them all the money is they want a new terminal, because they want people to go and shop there, and they want them to, as they're going to wherever it is they're going around the world, getting onto planes and things, they want them to spend their money in a new terminal. And that's why they're building it. So it tells you that they're not building it because they want to increase productivity at Heathrow. But they just want to bring more money in.
Yeah, but what about, say, for example, nuclear power stations?
Yeah.
A shovel in the ground to building a nuclear power station, it takes South Korea a few years.
Right.
It takes us 10 years to get to the planning stage, and then our cost per megawatt hour is 4 to 6 times higher because of these incredible constraints. But you have cheap energy through nuclear fission. You get on the learning curve so that each subsequent nuclear power station is cheaper to build because you have all of the learning.
But we have no expertise to build it. We have to get the French in, don't we?
We have done it, and China, by the way, are a big investor in Hinkley Point C. But if we'd got onto this earlier, we would now have a grid and an energy system that would keep electricity prices low, less dependency on natural gas from abroad, and then we would be able to drive product. Energy is the hub.
Of course.
The thermodynamic
Everybody
driver.
says the reason everything's so expensive and the reason why we're never going to control inflation is because everything is built upon the expensive energy that we have to use.
And yet we can't even get a proper decommissioning site for nuclear waste because we're worried about... We've got to... It will harm me when they build something near to me, something that is good for the country. I'm not saying that I'm going to be somebody who is not affected by this, but back in the day, we had a very... perhaps this is what it was, Mike. We had a very clear perception of the national interest. And we were willing to, as it were, bulldoze local concerns in order to keep our eyes on that fundamental prize. And now, because we don't have a very clear understanding of the national interest, we have all of these different lobbying groups, all protecting their own interest. The NIMBYism, which has stopped building construction of our energy.
Steve Reed, who's now the Housing Secretary, hilariously, has blocked, personally, 350 building projects in his own constituency.
It's embarrassing,
and he's now talking about building millions of homes in everybody else's constituency.
You know, I went to Vietnam, and I was just really curious to go to a country that's one of the fastest growing in the world.
Great food as well.
Good food.
Great food.
Is great.
Amazing, yeah. Sorry.
Oh,
anyway.
the food. Although I've got to say, sometimes it's spicy. Like,
yes.
Well, do you have Vietnamese cuisine in London?
Yeah, there's some great Vietnamese restaurants here. Yeah.
There was one in Richmond. It's gone now.
There's a great one in Deptford actually, which is where I go.
Oh, interesting. What kind of glass noodle soup?
Yeah, they do everything. It's always full of Vietnamese people.
But you know what amazed me? I was trying to explain to them what it was like living in Britain, because they're like so admiring of what it must be like to live in this country, and they also admire America despite the Vietnam War, because their growth is fueled by globalization, international free trade, and they think of America as an extraordinary country. They're not happy about what happened during the war, but they're like they're not bothered about the past. They're trying to shape the future. And then I said to them, you know, we have millions and millions of people of working age not working because of mental health conditions. I find it very difficult to explain to them.
I'm sure.
The proportion of the population who are not working and on welfare, the triple lock, and how that is continuing to rise and will eventually bankrupt us if we don't confront it. And they were trying to get me to explain it. The more I explained
most people don't get it.
Because they are hardworking, they're disciplined, they have self-reliance. And as I say, they're trying to shape the future. We're worried about were we a bad colonial power?
Yeah, I know.
300 years ago.
I'm not worried about that, by the way.
We're in a world where India is trying to seize the future, industrialise. China, obviously, a big risk to the whole world. This is the Chinese Communist Party. Vietnam, Poland is growing much faster. So they'll be richer than us per capita basis in 10 or 15. What I would love to see is a seriousness, a resolve. We're in a competitive world. If we don't act, we spend 10 years consulting on a nuclear power station. All the others have built it. They've got cheaper electricity. We can't even build our own ships, run our navy.
Keir Starmer's message, I'm being told we're running out of time here, but Keir Starmer's message...
Are they, but I thought we said the producers were good. And
they are good.
They're cutting me short. Not cutting you short.
That's why they're good. Because they said, enough of this guy, right?
You've had enough.
They've had enough. No, but you know, we get Keir Starmer's message of renewal. He says this word renewal all the time. What does he even mean? Nobody knows what he means by that.
I don't think he knows.
No.
I was asked by... I say off the record, there's like 4 cameras.
That's it. Don't tell anyone.
But they did approach me before the last general election. To stand, you know, you must have felt this from time to time. You know, we comment on what's happening. You know, maybe get on the inside and actually try and do something as a politician or an advisor. So, you know,
I'm never doing that, by the way.
Right? No, I know. You enjoy criticising, but that's no bad thing. We need a free press. But so I went in. What can I say? I'll perhaps say this. I wrote an open letter to Keir Starmer before the election. How to stop the boats, how to get on top of debt, how to reform planning, all the absolutely necessary things that they're still talking about now. I went to meet the Attorney General.
Hermer?
Because I wrote a column saying the only way to stop the boats is to reform the legal... If you want to do it legally, is withdraw for the Refugee Convention. You've got to amend the European Convention of... Otherwise, every time you try and deport them, they'll go to a judge. It was all obvious 5 years ago, 10 years ago. But there was no plan. They came in, they won power, and then they sort of sat down and thought, what next? And they caved to the unions without commensurate productivity gains. They broke the election promise on national insurance. And I'm sorry to say we're drifting under this government, which is why we need a new government. But I don't know how you feel about reform. I agree that we need to control our borders, but they don't seem to me to have a realistic fiscal...
I think the problem with reform is that they just need a lot more people, and they need a lot more sort of girth, if you like. You know, there's only a few of them, and they need to have some very serious people join and make it happen.
What did you think? I mean, the Conservatives, I do think, are sensible on the fiscal side.
Well, I just wrote a piece this week saying the Conservative Party's finished and it needs life support, and we're about to speak to Mel Stride in a minute.
Is Mel coming on? Well, all I'll say is I think Mel and Kemi Badenoch are right that fiscal realism, the other side of a potential bond crisis, where people think, my goodness, we've lived so profligate for so long. I think that is a position that is sellable. And I think the Conservatives just need to admit that they have made some terrible mistakes, but they have learned from the mistakes. I think they'll get a listening in the build-up to the next general election.
We'll see. Great to see you, Matthew. Thank you very much indeed.
You're looking good, by the way.
Thank you very much. I've got a personal trainer now. I've lost 2 stone.
No, is that really?
I'm not joking,
So it weights and cardio?
Weights, walking,
cardio,
eating different stuff.
The weights make such a difference.
It does. It really does.
Good for you.
Great to see you.
Yeah, likewise.
We must talk more. Matthew Syed, columnist at the Times and Sunday Times. Read him every Sunday. Must read. Absolutely must read every single week.